Reuben Jasper's father was Burrow Hill, and his mother was Sally Pruitt. On my grandmother Hill's side, she was Mariah Johnson, as I said. Her father was James Hampton Johnson, who is spoken of as the founder of Sharp, and her mother was Drusilla Staton. Now, my mother's people, as I said, she was a Nichols. Her mother was a Harrison, and that's about as far back as we can go. I think they all come from probably Carolinas and drifted down through Kentucky, maybe Warren County, and on maybe into Smithland and across like a lot of them come. But my grandfather Nichols, I can't go back too far with him. He was a Confederate soldier and was captured and spent time in the prison camp. In fact, almost died. He had the measles, I understand, and back then it hadn't much treatment for him, and he affected his stomach, and I think that followed him the rest of his life, although he lived to be an old man.
There was a General A.P. Hill, if I remember correctly, in the war between the states. So Hill's been a rather noted name.
Probably so. I think some of our people claims that Albert Sidney Johnson was probably a relative back
Yes.
there.
Let's see, George Washington Hill, I think of him right off as president of American Tobacco Company. So we've had a lot of millionaires, and then of course the fellow that built the Great Northern Railroad was a Hill.
I remember reading about him, yeah.
All right, now let's see, you were born in this county.
I was born in Sharp, about a couple of hundred yards from where I now live, and in 1914.
So that means you went to school at Sharp also.
I started school at Sharp, let me back up a little. We didn't live at one place very long. My father was a blacksmith, and he pounded it out on an anvil, and he had a large family. There's 7 boys and 4 girls. I was the middle man, and I think Pap always dreamed of making a living blacksmithing and getting on a farm, letting the boys make a whole lot of money. And together we'd get rich, but it never worked that way. You know, boys don't work too well by themselves. So we moved, after I was born here, we moved a mile and a half from here out to Bottom Road where...
and there were a lot of little one-room schools back in those days.
Yeah. In 1920, I started school at Sharp. My older brothers and sisters going here, so it was about almost 2 miles to Sharp, and it was almost the same distance to McCain up the Bottom Road. So they started at Sharp. I didn't do too good. First place I liked the pros. We walked, and I was a little shaver, and my older brothers and sisters would get a broomstick or something and hold it and let me hang on to it. But anyway, I didn't. Most people had forgot this, that knew it, and I didn't remind them of it till lately, and maybe I shouldn't have then, but I flunked my first year. It's the only flunk I made in school, but at Sharp. I just couldn't dig it somewhere or other. So the next year, my mother and daddy, the day before school started at McCain, they told me and my brother next to me that we'd go to McCain this year. We objected, but not too much, because, you know, when they said something back then, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So we started McCain and finished the best thing that ever happened, because I started learning. And
well, you had a different teacher. Do you remember that teacher's name?
Yeah, Matty Marson. And I went down here to Mamie Dalton at Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
McCain teacher was Matty Marson. Yeah, she was a good one. She was an old timer. Her word was the rule, and she looked at me. Well,
had good discipline.
Oh,
a little different Methodist teacher.
She better have good discipline.
Yeah.
So I caught up my missed year though, and I got in the third year. I went through the 3rd and 4th grade the same year, and I began to learn. And learning, I don't say it's bragging, because I don't think it's really an asset. Learning was easy for me, and I think kids I went to school with, some of them couldn't learn so easy. I think it stuck with them a lot better. I think if you had to dig it out a little harder, it would stick with you. But anyway, I went through the 3rd and 4th grade, and
Well, some of America's great minds have had a little difficulty in school. Thomas Edison, I understand, failed sometimes.
Dwight Eisenhower, I understand, was a long way from the top of his class at West Point, too.
That's true.
Although MacArthur, I understand, was number 1 in his class. But I went to McCain 4 years. Then we moved again. My daddy found a 200-acre farm. We just going to tear things up at Pleasant Grove, up the road, up 68 or 2 miles.
Uh-huh.
So we moved up there. And I went to Pleasant Grove for 2 years, 24, 25, I guess. And my teacher was Roy Nichols, who you know.
Uh-huh.
And then we didn't get rich, and so we moved back to Sharp.
Yeah.
And
my dad was a sharecropper, and we
Yeah.
moved a lot of different times. I think 12 times before
Well, when
I
you're a
finished
kid,
8th grade.
you don't worry about things like that. It was always an excitement when you get to go to a new place and you'd run around the place to see what all the new that you didn't have at the other place.
Yeah. Did you finally graduate at Sharp?
Graduated here. We moved back down here, and I was in the 6th grade, and I went to. In fact, the first year I was down here, Homer Holland was a great teacher. I went to him, and then he moved on to Lone Oak, I believe, and Roy Nichols come from Pleasant Grove down here. I went to 7th and 8th grade with him, and then went on to high school and finished up here.
Sharp had a high school. Do you have any idea about when that was?
Yeah, Sharp High School was established in 1917, 2-year school.
Mm-hmm.
But then it became a 4-year school, I believe, in 22.
Did you play basketball?
Well, I was on the team. There'd be some doubt as to.
Well, tell us
What my
about
production?
who coached back then.
Well, we had of course, whoever was convenient coached, really. But we had a fellow down here that come from up at old Pleasant Grove church section of Marshall County. His named Lurie Green. He come down here to teach history, and he inherited the coaching job. And all about 29 or 30. I graduated in 32, and we started in there, and I believe I played a little in 30, and then 30.
Were the uniforms at first red?
Well, back then the boys had to buy their own uniform, so they'd get together, whoever made the team, they'd decide what color we want this year. For instance, 25, they had red and green, if you can imagine. 26, they had blue and white. And 27, I think see, if you knew somebody on the team like Books, if you had graduated, if you could get their suit, well, then you could continue. If they didn't want to sell their suit, then you had to get new suits. But it went on like that until the fall of 31, which is my senior year. And Mr. Dow, by the way, my principal, when I started down there with John Bonder. And then in 1930, I believe, Mr. Ed Dow come down here from Western. He just graduated, he and his wife, and he was made principal and ag teacher. And with all due respect to all the teachers that's ever been at Sharp, I think Mr. Dow, everybody will admit that he did more to go along with change that was necessary than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He talked to agriculture boys, and he's a very humble man, and but he talked to us like we was men. He talked to us about the birds and the bees and things that we should have already known. Most of us did, but we learned at the wrong place.
Yeah.
But and he also thought it was a tragic thing that boys had to play basketball for the school, and their parents already having to give them up when they could be home working and things like that.
Did I hear a story that you might have been involved in naming the Green
Yeah.
Devils?
That's what I started saying. Mr. Dow thought that the boys shouldn't have to buy their own suits, so he said we were going to do something about it. So he sent the word out to the community. He'd already made a pretty good impression on the community. So the mothers was asked one on a certain Friday in October, I guess, to if they could donate well, nobody had any money in 31. He donate a hen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hens is one thing. It brought more then to do now. I don't know if you knew that or not. You get $2 for a pretty good hen. So the produce man brought a bunch of chicken coops out there, and you never saw such a mess of hens. Everybody started throwing them hens in there, and we sold shipped hens. Got enough to buy our suits. Well, the coach called the basketball boys, 8 of us in the conference, and wanted to know what kind of suits we wanted. So we entered into a discussion, debate, and some of them wanted to be purple, and some of them, but green won out. And then we wanted to know.
And that was the coach's name, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, there's another tale that come out. That's a good story, but it wasn't exactly true. But then we decided what to name them, and we decided to name them. Well, someone was Green Wave, like Tulane, you know.
Yeah.
But they come out with the Green Devils, and this is the original suit had the devil's head on it.
You have a photograph there, yeah. and there's a devil's head on there.
Now, some of them told later, I think Mr. Green, he was quite a joker anyway. He's still living, by the way. It must be 90. He told some of them later that the coach's name was Green and the boys was mean as the devil, so they decided to call them the Sharp Green Devils.
I had heard that story.
No, that wasn't exactly true, but it's a good story. But that was the start of the Green Devils, and due to the work of Mr. Ed Dowell. He went on from Sharp to Cuba.
You had already been graduated then when they won the state tournament in 38.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't get close to winning the state tournament. We had a lot of fun, that was about all. I graduated in 32.
Now you, along somewhere in there, you got married, I guess.
No, not in there. I was a year later before I got married. I had a war to win and had to get my degree in Detroit, like most of them did back in the 30s. Mm-hmm. I come home and registered and was drafted and went to the war, and then married after going home from the war.
And your wife?
Lida Shepherd. She come down from Heights, our lower section on Johnson Creek. They was, of course, when they built the dam, that they had to relocate, so they come down in this community. She finished school here, and then we got married in 1947. Of course, I was 33, but I had a lot to do before I got married, and I got that done. Me and a fellow named MacArthur won a war in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And then about the same time, she throws it up to me now in October the 6th, I believe. I had my first date with her, and I believe about the middle of September, the Soil Improvement Association had hired me, and she always reminds me that Soil Improvement Association comes first with me, because I was with them in September. I didn't meet her till October. She said that's my first love. But of course I've retired now, so she's got me.
Now, Lida also was a mail carrier, was that?
Yeah, she started working in 1955 as a sub, 56, somewhere along there, and of course we thought it over a lot before she went to work then, whether or not she could handle it or where we wanted her to or not. Of course, I was working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and lived on the farm, and she was doing the farming. But we decided it'd be a good experience for her, so she took off like that, and I think she carried about maybe 15, 16 years as a sub, and then she, you just keep getting in. You can't turn loose, so she had an opportunity to get on regular, and so she did, and she went then till last November, and she got a retirement time, and she retired, so everything worked out pretty good for us. We haven't got any...
You have a beautiful home here.
Well,
a lot of nice maple shade trees.
Yeah, we got too much. You used to say that that caused more bankruptcy than anything. These shade trees, farmers set the shade instead of working in them. But we're past that. We're not farming much. But we moved here 4 years ago. My mother-in-law, Miss Shepherd, lives here, and she's getting up in years, so we made an arrangement to come out and build, and she lives next door to us there, you know. So it's all worked out very good. And we, since Lida retired too in November, we're making it very well.
All right. Let's talk about what you'd like to talk about next.
Well, my schooling, I had a thing or two wrote down here about what we did at school.
Well, let's hear that. That's always interesting.
We played mumble peg. And
I've heard of mumble peg.
Well,
how did you do that? Use a knife?
Open your knife, and if you flip it, and whatever sticks in the ground, that's how many points you get. And we played marbles, of course. We played roly hole or holy roll, whatever it was, you know, dig holes and shoot marbles. That was very, very, and then when you get...
At Louisville Saturday, I saw a description of that for the first time in my life. Now, I'd played marbles, but you always aimed at marbles in a circle, and then you shot and tried to knock them out of the circle and so on and so on. But now, I'd never heard of this before.
Yeah,
Could you tell us what you did?
Well, you had about, I believe, 4 holes. You'd start up here and shoot you got in the hole. When you took your marble out, you took a span with your hand, and that's where you played your marble, like kind of like golf, you know. And I don't remember how you counted, but you went up and then you come back, and the person back here was the winner. And of course, we pitched washers.
Now, I've done that.
Rather than horseshoes. We didn't pitch much horseshoes. We, in the spring of the year, one of the first things we did, if we get outside, was to play hoops. We'd take a broomstick and a little 12-inch piece and nail it across the end and get a hook like a steel
off a wagon hub.
Around a wagon hub and roll that around. We'd get to school an hour early and play till to school time.
I've rolled those hoops. That was fun to me.
Let me tell you something unique. I don't believe anybody's mentioned this about Sharp back in the 20s. Somewhere along 26 or 27, give or take a few years. In Sharp, we had 3 general stores, or one really general store, and 2 more besides that. And where Sharp starts with S, and the stores are run by C, Smith, and Stevens. They was all S's too. And in high school in 26, I think that was the same year, we had 4 boys to graduate. And they were Stinson, Solomon, and C. But the other was Lackey. But actually, ironically, it was Lyle Stinson, L.S., Leland C., L.S., Leighton Solomon, L.S., and Lorenzo Lackey, L.L. At the same time, Ray, or about the same time, up at Palma.
That's an unusual thing.
Yeah, you had 3 stores up there in the blacksmith shop. Palma had Poe, Powell, Peel, and Peck run the blacksmith shop.
All starting with the letter P.
Yeah, the same.
I remember
same
Irvin Poe, of course.
Yeah, it was pretty unusual, I thought.
There was at one time a Story grocery here, wasn't there?
That was years later. Yeah, Ted Story and of course Stagner. There's two more.
Yeah.
Stagner built a big store up here in 1940. I helped him build that before I went to the war, and then a few years later, Ted Story moved across the street and built a little store. Stagner built his in 41 because I put the... I'd like to tell you something about the highway here, too. This was used to call it the State Road, you know.
I've heard my dad say that he would haul tobacco from Hardin to Paducah. And that,
get stuck up the road here about 2 miles.
The road was terrible, but when you got to Sharp, it was gravel from Sharp to Paducah.
Well, I guess he was thinking most of course, a mile down the road from a cracking kind of line. They always had better roads than we had. They had it gravel. This road here was pretty common and used to go up and down a lot. So in 1929, I believe they let the contract to reconstruct it. Of course, at that time they had no right-of-way either. Your deed called to the center of the road. So they got deeds and started and built it all by mule power and by hand. I didn't see a gasoline engine of any kind on that road, and we watched it from the time it went from.
That was then 95, wasn't it?
No, it's 68. It's been Jeff Davis Highway. Well, not that I know of now. I couldn't.
Well,
I could admit
the
that.
part from, I don't know where they started 95, but the part that ran from Hardin to Hazel at least was then 95. And it
Well,
stayed
that never was
way.
68. Of course, 68
No, that's
goes.
true.
68 used to go to Zion College Church and veer to the right there across the old covered bridge into Benton. But then when they really reconstructed and got state-owned right-of-way, it continued from Zion's College Church on up to Ignis Ferry through Bryansburg and so on. Now this portion of the road that they built in 29 went to the 641 Y at Draftonville. That's as far as it went, and that new part from there on was built later, brand new. But it's built in 29 and 30. And then they surfaced it. By the way, they gravelled it. It's the bank gravel, and they had 3 gravel pits. Had one up here at my brother Pace's place, we call it, and then one up at Powell and one on up the other way. They used trucks to gravel it with. Shack trucks. You ever hear of Shack?
No?
SCHACTT, I believe. And I learned later, years later, of course this was 29, just 10 years, 11 since World War I. I learned later that these trucks were German trucks that had been confiscated
In
at the end
World
of the
War
in World War I. And they come from Indianapolis, the contract did, and I don't know what they looked, don't remember now, but I don't guess they hauled over a couple of tons of gravel.
Probably
But they
not.
was rattly old solid rubber tar.
Uh-huh.
But they graveled the road with those trucks, and they had of course, depression was on, and unemployment was pretty high, so they had a committee up and down the road of 3 or 4 men that helped to furnish the manpower. Then in 32, of course, they surfaced it with concrete. And since then we've had a pretty good road. I might say too that over at south of here at Elva, the railroad comes through there, and they had a station there, and then north here at Little Cypress, about the same distance, maybe 2 or 3 miles.
The Illinois Central,
Illinois
and
Central
the other
there.
was the NC in St. L.
Yeah. So the road that went from Elva to Little Cypress comes through Sharp, of course, which made it kind of a hub. But of course, time took its toll, and supermarkets predominated over
The small family grocery store.
So we don't have any business here now. Possum Trot, of course, has grown. 62 went through Possum Trot, the new road, and I-24 went close by, and they moved Little Cypress out to Possum Trot, and so they have kind of prospered. Well, Sharp's a good place to live. We still have a quiet neighborhood, but there's no business at all now, except the school. And by the way, we got churches too. Of course, Church of Christ up here, and 2 churches down the road here that I'll tell you about.
I wanted to ask you why that Methodist church is called Oakland.
I was going to tell you that years ago the community was called Oakland. And you could, if you look around up and down the road, you see some huge red oak trees, and it was called Oakland. And the story is that when my great grandfather ran the store up here, the big general store, of course, and he had the post office and everything else that was in there. And they come to him and told him one day that they had a conflict at, I think it was Oak Level. They'd always get it confused with Oakland, and they wanted to name it something else. Now, people tell you different things. I don't know who named it Sharp, but anyway, it was named Sharp. But the Presbyterian and the Methodist Church never changed their name. They still go with Oakland. Of course,
They're still Oakland.
About 3/4 of a mile down the road.
I can remember that was the smoothest road along there. It was made out of Kentucky rock asphalt when I was young man, high school.
It was
That was a beautiful little brick building there, too. I guess it's still the same that it was
it's the
then.
Presbyterian Church.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they've got a nice church there, and also at the Methodist, and now we've got of course, a Missionary Baptist Church over
Hmm.
right here close in.
So you have four
Four
churches here in
right
Sharp.
here, and of course some more, not the Mount Moriah, of course, is not very far over. Primitive Baptist, but I think we're well blessed with churches.
Yes. You're speaking of your father. I want to mention before I forget it that as first time I ever went to big singing, I was 8 years old, and for years thereafter, I remember what a great singer he was.
He liked to sing. I didn't really appreciate his singing, or my mother's either. Of course, when you're growing up, things like that's not not important to you. But I remember hearing my mother sing. She had a beautiful treble voice. She could sing like a canary.
Now, your father was a brother to Mr. Boonhill,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
they were brothers.
He was on school board for years.
Yeah.
I remember that.
There was a big family of them. There's, I guess, 5 girls and 3 boys. The oldest one was a boy, but he died rather young. But my daddy and Uncle Boone, of course, lived to be. Well, my daddy lived 5 months. He'd been 100, and Uncle Boone was 6 years younger. He lived almost that long. But they just wore out like everybody.
Well, you know, we're down to only 3 minutes left, so I'd like for you to kind of concentrate your thoughts and put in what you don't want to leave out.
Well, I believe we covered about all of it, Ray. I could say that I always like to mention the Sharp community, how it has, how people here have backed their community. The Sharp Community Fair is well known. Back in the 20s, when the county fair folded up, the people in the Sharp community continued with the community fair, which was the highlight of the school kids' year. I never will. I can still feel the enthusiasm and the thrill I had when all that week we'd be getting ready with watercolors and ink and painting posters and things for the fair, and then usually then it was on Friday and Saturday, and then the Thursday night it'd come up a cloud and start raining. It would just break your heart, you know. But then sometimes it would rain maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, and then Thursday afternoon it would clear off, which made you very happy. But we had quite a fair. There's always been a lot of community spirited people here. We had a lot of Rudolphs and Lackey family and the Rothwells and just a lot more that was Clifton, Norman. And back then, in the 20s, before they built the high-speed road through here, you could just drive your cattle up and down the road, you know. So come fair time, they'd go to the neighbors down around the school there and get them to use their barn and their lot fence and things. And most people over in the northwest section of the county had a lot of milk cows. They'd milk and sell cream. And they'd just turn their cattle out in the road and drive them to the fair. All of them had 8 or 10 cows and a herd bull, and they're proud of them.
Yeah.
And we'd have, and you could tell by the color of the cattle belonged to this
So
man
and
or
so.
that. No, yeah, because the bull they had reflected the color, you know. And then we had families would put exhibits in that fair. They'd have shocks of corn, they'd have pumpkins and turnips and everything they raised, and we just had a big time. And then they'd wind it up, of course, on Saturday night with a fiddler contest.
Yeah.
And it was a great thing. I just think that the people that have gone on here have done more for, and I believe they still have the same spirit.
They had a lot of pride
They
in
sure
this
did.
community.
They sure did.
And
They had some talent too.
It led, and Jack Bailey was here, wasn't he?
Jack Bailey went to school, and he was one of the original Green Devils. He was a junior when I was a senior, and he went to high school here, and graduated in '33. We, well, of course, we had The members of the Greendale team, I might name is.
Let's close off with that. Did you have a Barrett or a Lampley or a?
We had a Lampley. We had the original Lampley. A lot of people think Charlie was, but he wasn't. We had William Lampley, who played. We had John D. Lackey, who was one of the Lackey boys, who went on to be quite a doctor, but he died young. Frank Thomason, and like you said, Jack Bailey. Harley Lyles was a workhorse. Woodrow Hancock, who you probably know, and Joe Dwight Luton and myself. We had 8 then. We had, of course, 2 forwards in the center. Then you had a sub guard, a sub center, and a sub forward.
Yeah.
8 people is all you needed.
Well,
we had a lot of fun. We didn't win much.
That's great. I've had a wonderful time interviewing you, and I appreciate your cooperation.
Glad you could come.
And I'm close off simply by saying that we've been visiting in the home of Woodrow and Lada Hill in Sharp, and we return you now to our studios in Benton.
I was going to tell them about this pet business, Lada, but I've already passed.